What's up, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of our review of Season 1 of The Wheel of Time. My name is Chip,
I'm Brittany.
and we're going to give you our thoughts on each episode of the season and the season as a whole. And I want to let you know that we have seen all of the episodes, so this isn't like an initial reaction. We've watched them a couple times, and we're going back and we're giving you our thoughts on each episode.
Also, I am a non-book reader, and Chip has read all of the books and the entire series multiple times.
So now that you have the background, let's jump right into Season 1, Episode 1, which is called Leave Taking. And I gotta say, I waited a long time for this show to come out. I was pretty impressed with the first episode and the way they started it out. What'd you think?
I think the episode as a whole was good. I definitely think there are some problem areas. The cold open against the entire series was my least favorite. However, going back and watching it, I do think it gives you the idea of, like, as a non-book reader, as like, what are these people? What are these women? Why are they kind of scary? And I think also kind of develops that idea that these people are not to be messed with, and why other people may be wary of them.
Yeah, and I think from the book reader's perspective, obviously we don't see anything like this in the books. Getting right out the gate, understanding that the Reds are going to be, introduced early and they're going to be a part of the story, where in, the first book they're really not in there, I think is a good way to kind of build the world for everybody else who hasn't read it. Plus, the actresses that they got to, especially Leandrin was a badass. Her little speech about how, men, when they touch the power, it taints it. I wasn't cool with that because, that's just not how it works. But, I can understand how it works, how they put that in there for the book reader or for the non-book reader audience.
Yeah, I mean, I also think the Maureen parts are just, I think as an actress in this role, for me, like, she definitely nails it. She's kind of snobby, like she's kind of like intense, like she's just all of these different characters, but she's kind of like underneath kind of got this like tiny heart of gold, and you're just like, I don't know what this person is, and she's interesting, and I really, really loved her as the pick. I think Lan is just fantastic. He's kind of intense as well, handsome, great fighter, sort of just not somebody you mess with. And so I think that those characters were just like initially built so well. And just the Aes Sedai as a whole, kind of like, oh my gosh, as a non-book reader, who are these people? What's the deal? What's this? How are they all connected? And actually at the beginning, you don't even know those Reds are even Aes Sedai, because you have to kind of get through it as a non-book reader to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think that's, it's intentional and it's, well done. They build up stuff so you could pay it off later, which I think is good. I also really liked how at the end of that cold open, they panned out and you see like the torn down skyscrapers.
Absolutely.
And stuff.
I actually have that written down.
I really think that's cool.
That's really neat to see, like, what is this world? It's beautiful. It's interesting. It's, what's happened.
Yeah, and in the books, they always kind of allude to the Age of Legends as like a technologically advanced time, but they never really show it. And I think showing like these torn down skyscrapers was a cool way to kind of illustrate that in the show. As far as casting throughout the rest of the show, obviously I like Maureen and Lan as well. And I think that casting-wise, they did as good of a job as they could have. I mean, every character that they introduce, from that cold open on is exactly what I would think they would be. They are a little older, but that's okay. I understand why they did that for the show. But in terms of do they embody the character that they're playing, I think, across the board, yeah.
I think so, too. But I think the idea of them being older doesn't necessarily take away from the fact of the book. I still think that these are people that live in a very small town. They really are, in a way, like, still, while they're not, like, 16, I guess, that they are in the book or whatever, I do think that they really capture sort of the youngness. I mean, being 20 years old, I mean, you're still kind of, like, figuring out life. You're still trying to get through things. So I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just you have a tiny bit more life experience, but when you've never been out of your town, you really don't. So I don't think that that was a huge difference.
So from the book reader's perspective, going through kind of the rest of the episode.
What did you think of the push off the mountain? With the
Yeah,
girls?
with all that, I mean, they never really talk about that in the book. They do allude to like a braiding ceremony or whatever when the women's circles allows you to have a braid. I think it was a cool way to also set up, how women feel when they embrace the power. You're supposed to just kind of like ride the wave, kind of. It was like a little Easter egg for the book readers, I think. So I thought that was fine. And I thought the presentation of Emmons Field was exactly how I would have pictured it. I pictured the village green a little bit bigger, that central area. I pictured it to be a little bit bigger. But other than that, it was exactly how I expected it to look. And, again, some of the changes, like I really didn't like the changes they made to Matt's family, because that does come, those people do come back later in the books, and I do like them, but we'll see what happens. And the changes with Perrin, the fact that he's married and he ends up killing his wife in the Trolloc attack. I didn't like it at first, but I understand why they did it, because Perrin is a very internal character in the books. He never really talks. I mean, 80% of his storyline is inside of his head, so you have to have a way to visualize why he is the way he is, and I think they did a good job with that. It was just a little shocking at first.
So my initial reaction to, because Chip basically did, he was like, well, that's not in the books. And I did know a little bit about the history of some of the things of Wheel of Time through Chip, not reading it, but just kind of knowing and hearing about it. Mm-hmm. And my initial reaction when he kills his wife is like, oh, it's history repeating itself, because former dragon does kill his whole family. And to me, it reminded me of like I know that that's not an actual like line in the book, because they never really talk about that, but to me, just that my first initial watch, never really knowing anything, I was like, oh man, like history is repeating itself. Not that that's like a theory, or not that that's an Easter egg to anything else, but it was just my initial reaction. Now that I kind of know a little bit more and things like that, I do think it speaks more to Perrin's pain throughout the rest of the season, and maybe and further, I don't know. There was a couple of weird things that were happening with some of the characters. There was the fact that like Perrin's wife was like, I guess, like upset and working at home, and he has to leave a party and go like talk to her. And there were some different things that you're kind of like, I don't know what's necessarily going on behind the scenes of their relationship. It did seem like she was upset about something, but that's not the reason why he kills her. It was an accident, and it's all very fast. I would say that my only problem with this whole series is that it's super, super fast, and so you kind of don't get to like dive deep into specifics on a lot of these things. They just sort of happen, and you're just like, okay, that happened, and then we're like moving on. So that's my only thing, is like I wish, and I guess it does kind of come up later in the later seasons of maybe why he was why they may have been having tension. So we can go over that when that episode comes.
Yeah, for sure. And they're definitely it was definitely setting stuff up to pay off later, but I don't like the payoff on that one. So we'll get to that when we get there. As far as, like you mentioned, the fact that Perrin's wife is working the forge while he's like partying, I didn't really like that. That doesn't seem like a very Perrin thing to do. You got to have some changes from the book. I understand why they did what they did when you're trying to adapt a book to the show. But to your complaint about everything being too fast, I agree 100%. Like, I think the Emmons Field whole scenario should have been 2 episodes. It should have been them establishing what Emmons Field is, where this world is, what's going on. Maureen gets there, and they have, all this stuff going on, and then the Trolloc attack happens in episode 2. So we have a ton of time to build
I agree.
Story, characters, and all that stuff.
I did in this episode get where I don't get in the other episodes, a lot of Matt, Perrin, and Rand having conversations around the table. being friends, showing that there is a love and camaraderie between them, and Egwene and Nynaeve as well, being together, sort of having that, like, if in the future they're supposed to go on this grand adventure together, what is the glue that really holds them together? And I did get a little bit of that, but I'm thirsting for it, I think, throughout the entire series, and I hope that they work on that, I think, in general.
Yeah, I mean,
going
even
forward.
if you add 30 more minutes to that episode where you could just add a little bit more, exactly what you're talking about, a little bit more character building, right? I mean, we meet Rand, and then, you know, he has a few minutes with Perrin and Matt at the table, but there really isn't any background as to
Right.
why these guys are friends or how close their relationship really is. We just see them talking a little bit. Like, they could be acquaintances for all we know.
Well, there is that moment where Perrin and Rand give Matt the money to
Right.
buy his sisters the little thing for bell time. And that was such a precious moment. There are just not enough moments where you get the boys or even the whole five together sort of laughing, and the moments that they do have are so, like, fleeting, like they're just gone in 2 seconds, and it's not enough to really feel like these are 20-year-olds who are about to go on this great adventure together. It's a little hard, it's a little rushed.
Yeah, I think Amazon dropped the ball, honestly, in terms of only giving them 8 episodes for first season. You know, Game of Thrones did 10, and it was great. Covers the whole book, and I think they could have done a lot more if they had 2 more episodes. But that's neither here nor there. The best scene of the entire episode for me was when Maureen and Lan are fighting the Trollocs. I love the way they visualize the power and how she uses it. At times it does look kind of weird with her flailing her arms about, but I think that that's true to the character and what it would look like for an Aes Sedai of this age when they fight. And I just love the way that Lan moves around her the whole time. So he's like constantly prowling around her, and it shows really what you don't really visualize that as much in the books, like because he's got to talk about how they're killing the Trollocs with the power, but you don't really think about Lan swooping around killing everybody around her, which I just thought was awesome. And then the way the scene ends with the building collapsing, it was top notch.
Absolutely. And I have to say, like, I have heard people are up and down on whether or not they like the way that the power looks. I personally, as a non-book reader and not like into it, I like love it so much. I think it looks great. I love the flailing. I love the, like, intensity of it and how slow and I actually, like, love it. And when she falls and Lan comes to, like, you know, protect her and the building falls, it's just it's a great moment. And I think just shed that, you know, when I said that Maureen kind of has that snobby sort of like uptight sort of intense personality, I think it kind of showed her, like, soft side, that she was willing to, like, go this far on her body to save these people and to even to save especially the possible dragon, right? And that's sort of kind of who she is.
Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly true to the books, too, so that's why I loved it. You know, like, books, they're all skeptical of who she is, and then when they find out she's an Aes Sedai, they, like, are all mad about it, but at the same time, she's just saved you and has been using her power to heal everybody, and that, to me, I thought was spot on. Great scene, and a great way to end the episode, honestly. You know, like, at the very end, they do the intro speech from the books, which was a great nod for any book reader. I loved that. And I think that, you know, as far as an episode to start, given the constraints that they had to work with, I thought it was a very strong opening episode. It made me want to watch more.
What did you think of the Trollocs? And be truthful, because I've heard people liked them okay in episode 1. What was your feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw them, I thought they looked sweet for the most part. You know, like, when you see them running at super speed, it looks kind of weird. But again, you know, there's only so much they can do in terms of CGI. But I thought the practical ones, the ones that they actually built the suits for, I thought they looked sweet. I was hoping to see a bird-beaked one. We didn't see that.
I thought they had one.
They did in the extra scenes. I didn't see it in you know, the behind the scenes. They had one, but I didn't see one in the actual footage. But I thought it looked cool.
I thought the Trollocs were fine. You know, I mean, could they get better, sure. And I think maybe in the future they will. But I thought overall for what they were, is they're kind of these like dumb, monstrous creatures that come to kill, and that's what they did. And I think that they nailed it okay with those, at least in the first episode.
Yeah, I agree. Now, what do you rate this episode on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think this episode is a solid between 7 and 8. It's definitely not a 10 or anything. It's a great start, I think, to the whole series. But I think it had some flaws.
Yeah, so I would give this episode a 7.3. I think that's a fair value. I like to use decimals to be more precise, plus it gives me a little bit more wiggle room. Yeah, I think it was a strong open. I remember when we first watched it, I was ready to go right on to episode 2. So, not bad. It's only when if you want to nitpick things, you can. And I think a lot of people that are book readers especially tend to nitpick things more than they should. Like, I kind of come from the perspective that I'm just glad to see it on the screen finally.
Oh,
yeah.
Don't say that though.
Well, no, I really that's kind of where I am. Is like, as long as it's relatively faithful, I'm going to be happy with it.
I think episode 1 is pretty faithful, right, to the books.
Relatively,
in most cases. I want to talk about 2 other things. I want to talk about the introduction of Nynaeve and Maureen, which is kind of an ongoing theme. I love how Maureen meets Nynaeve and she says, people think, you're too young to be in this position, to be a wisdom. And, it's kind of that idea of like, I'm going to kind of tear you down and sort of praise you at the same time. And also sort of finding out how old she is. Just sort of pushing her a little bit, pecking at her a little bit, I thought was interesting. Another thing was Rand's dad. I said when he starts fighting, I thought that was a really cool moment where Rand's even sort of like, oh my gosh, my dad is like fighting this sheep farmer. Another thing I liked were when the girls are sort of confronted with the Trolloc, when he comes behind, when I say the girls, Egwene and Nynaeve are confronted with this Trolloc that's right there, and they sort of fight to the death. That is an interesting, I think, moment, because while they seem very tough and they're ready for this world, they're kind of put in a moment where they have to fight. And I think all the characters do at that moment. I think Matt running to find his sisters is a really interesting moment. And I think a good character building, where we talk about the characters not being together, there are some good character building. Matt running to find his sisters was a great moment. It really showed that Matt is sort of like this, sort of gambler, kind of hustler guy. But yet in the moment, he is going to go out in this horrendous moment to save his sisters. Perrin, fighting as much as he had, that was sort of his story. And even though he ended up killing his wife, it's so tragic. I mean, I think that they are buildable moments. There are buildable moments, is what I'm trying to say.
I love Nynaeve. I think she was casted perfectly. And I agree with a lot what you said. Like, I didn't really think about that Matt thing. And it does fit his character, especially later in the books. Because early in the books, he's kind of a little bitch, to be honest. I didn't really like Matt. I think most book readers will agree with me. You really don't like Matt early in the books, but eventually he becomes one of the best characters in the books. So I think that was an interesting way that they conveyed his mentality and the way he approaches saving people for a person who hasn't read the books, and that came through pretty quickly. So that's pretty impressive to me as a book reader, to see that you didn't even know that about him, and you just picked it out of that one little scene. So that's pretty cool.
I think there are definitely these moments, and you do have to kind of watch, I think, at least twice to see some things that you don't see. And we're obviously like sort of taking notes this time. So I'm kind of watching it a little bit differently than I would just casually, I guess.
For sure. If you want to get the most out of this, you got to watch it more than once. I agree
Absolutely.
with that 100%. But book reader or non-book reader, honestly. Like, either way, if you really want to get into this show and you thought, oh man, that was pretty good the first time I watched it again. I think you'll like it even more. All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 1. Thanks for tuning in. We will have more episodes coming out down the line, and we will cap this whole thing off with an overall season review. So you're not going to want to miss that. So be sure to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you later.